Hey guys, Bored Now back with you. On this video I'm going to be reviewing the first episode of the new Netflix series The Midnight Club. Episode 1 is called The Final Chapter. Full spoilers as always. As far as I know, this is a one-off limited series. It's based on the novel by Christopher Pike, and for horror fans it's pretty big stuff because Mike Flanagan is the showrunner, the creator, the sort of writer director in some cases, but he of course had a massive hit with The Haunting of Hill House a few years ago and has done a few follow-up projects with Netflix. He did Midnight Mass last year, for example, different things. So this is his latest and based on quite a well-known novel. This time, although it does have a horror feel to it, it does feel a bit more of a teenage style drama. It's set in the 1980s, and you have the lead character of Alorca, who finds out on the eve of her turning 18 and on the eve of her going off to college that she has a form of cancer, like thyroid cancer, that needs treatment urgently, and this changes her whole life. It stops her from going off to college, it stops her from going and joining her best friend at college, and it obviously means she has to put her life on hold and she has to have treatment. Now she finds out around about the time of her 18th birthday that the treatment isn't working and that there's maybe not much more they can do for her. So she researches it on the internet and she finds out about this institution which specialises in treatment for such conditions. And she reads up on the history and she persuades her stepdad to let her go there to see if they can work wonders with her. And that's when we really gets the setup for the series, where she gets there. And there's already been one incident of supernatural type thing happening to her, where right before, because she passed out at a party earlier on in the episode, and it's after that then they find out she's got the cancer. So she had this flash of some weird guy in the mirror right back at her, and he sort of had a deformed face, and then later on, when they get to this institute, this place, she has another flash where she thinks she sees something a little bit weird. So from there she gets introduced to the different people, the different patients who all have kind of different conditions, and some of them are more welcoming towards her than others. Most of them are quite friendly, she hits it off with this guy Kevin. She gets chatting to a couple of others. There's different sort of kind of quirky personality traits. So there's this one who her whole thing is that she exaggerates things and she tells lies about different things, like having relatives in the movie business, or at one point she's playing violin and she claims that she actually wrote the song herself. And Alorca's told, then you've got to treat her with a pinch of salt, everything she says. So it spends a bit of time getting to know the different patients at this place. And she meets her roommate, Anya, who's very kind of punky and, quite brash talking, quite direct, and very sort of rude. She has a bit of a cynical edge to her compared with some of the others who are more easygoing generally. But Anya starts telling her about Rachel, who was her roommate before Alorca, and how Rachel ended up dead, and she sort of talks about how she was into witchcraft and performing spells. So you get the impression that's going to play into the plot quite heavily. So the setup is then Alorca follows follows on one night when she's like sneaking out, and she like sees her with the others down in the basement, and they've started this club, the Midnight Club of the title, where they all tell like horror style stories to each other, and they take it in terms of telling the story, and you see like the story like represented on screen. So this is where the series has a little bit of like an anthology throwback, ghost story style feel. And someone mentioned like at one point how like in some ways the idea is then they're creating like ghosts or creating like monsters that become sort of real, and obviously I don't think they believe that. They don't mean that literally, but that's definitely something you can see the story doing. But one thing leads to the other, and Aluka, they agree eventually to let her in. It's only really Onna who's like opposing it, but like Aluka teases them with this story that she's got about a girl who had a similar condition, and she tells this sort of story about how the girl went missing one day at a similar institute, and she came back like a month later, and it turns out she didn't die, and she didn't know when she would die, but she had this power where she could determine everybody else's, like people around her, their death, sort of the time they would, and she would say like the numbers sort of thing, and it's revealed later then that's a real gal who Alaka as like research. So Alaka, it turns out, has been doing a lot of research into this place, and she has actually come there to investigate what exactly is going on. But I think what's a really interesting hook and a really interesting character beat for Alonka, and the way the premise is set up, is then she says to Kevin at one point, I believe I'm going to live because I've heard these stories about these other girls. I'm here to explore this place more, than there's more to it than meets the eye. But that's something she puts forward, and that's a good way into the drama, because the rest of them are sort of maybe resigned to, one day we're going to die from this disease, one day, it's going to get the better of us. And Alaka's much more positive, partly because of her research, and she's like, no, this isn't going to happen. We're going to live, and I'm going to find out more about this place. So that's actually quite a juicy little hook for the series moving forward. This first episode is mostly set up, so I don't have too much of an impression. I think it's solid. There's some good ideas. I quite like the world it creates. I thought Alonka was watchable enough, engaging enough. The actress was natural. I quite liked her. Her stepdad, who we got to know a little bit, was likeable also. Some of the other characters were a bit mixed, but they were fine, and once you got into the premise, there's definitely some stuff to play with like this. And I am a bit of a sucker for like this sort of idea of an old school anthology, and sort of like being quite creative within like an ongoing story, but throwing these kind of like pulpy sort of stories in there. And like one of them who's telling the story at one point is like really doing the old school, jump scare type thing on them. And I like that they actually have a debate about jump scares, and is it like legitimate horror. That's pretty cool considering it's an 80s set thing, so that's probably at the stage where jump scares wasn't so much of a thing as it is today, so I quite like that. So the drama of it I thought was solid. I like then Alaka. The episode actually starts with her and her stepdad, and she's got like a new hairstyle, and she's like trying that out, and it's quite a change for her, because that sets up later on she's obviously going to have to like lose her hair when she's going through this cancer treatment. So that's an important kind of opening shot and scene. My only real complaint with the episode, two things. One, the CGI isn't very good. Like, whenever we get a flash of something and they're using CGI, it doesn't look very good. It looks pretty ropey and cheesy, and you can sort of tell it's an effect. Which is surprising and a shame, because you would have thought maybe for a Mike Flanagan Netflix show, you sort of expect decent money to be put into it. And I mean, for example, The Haunting of Hill House, the CGI in that, not that we get that much, but there's, some sprinkled in there, and I thought the CGI in that was really good, personally. So it's a little surprising. Maybe it's just a bit of an afterthought for them, and it's not really what's important to the thing. Because it's the sort of story where maybe they can get around that, and maybe it's not going to be that important, as long as they don't call attention to it too often. And I think maybe because it's meant to be like kind of, celebrating this idea of kind of storytelling and pulp sort of fiction and stuff like that, then maybe there's an element of that stuff is intentional. Maybe the effects are a bit ropey on purpose. I'm not sure, but I think they can get around it as long as the character drama is good enough, as long as there's enough of a mood outside of the effect sort of thing, and the mystery is like intriguing enough. The other thing is there are one or two cheesy lines which maybe are left over from the book that could work better in the book. I don't know. But for example, there's a small role for Heather Langenkamp in the pilot, which is always good to see her, but like she plays the woman who like runs the place, and she just has a really cheesy bit of dialogue, a really cheesy sort of preachy style speech about how every day is like a struggle in this place, how every day is like a war sort of thing, and she's just getting very sort of preachy and fancy with her words, but it just came off as a really kind of corny, scripted speech. It didn't really sound like something someone would really say. But hopefully we'll see more of Heather Langenkamp, because it's always good to see her. But just one or two complaints. Generally, I thought it was a solid pilot. It's mostly set up, and I'm definitely intrigued to see more of it. Certainly, I don't think it's going to reach the heights of The Haunting of Hill House. It's a different kind of thing, maybe aimed at a bit of a younger audience, but so far I'm into it quite a bit. I thought it was solid stuff is the way I would say it. So I'm definitely going to check out more of this, and I should be back with the next review tomorrow. So that's episode 1 of the Midnight Club. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you've read the books, let me know how you think it's shaping up to the book so far. And just comment on this episode. Don't spoil anything any further. But yeah, I'll be back tomorrow with the next review of the Midnight Club. But thanks for listening. See you guys later.